I'm not going to worry about your level of concern.
We talking about Twitter.
Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
This is a big game because we're in it.
Go get number 7.
Never give up on the Steelers.
This is a product of your journey, and your journey's not over yet. Woo!
It's a new year, 2025. And that's also the exact same number of haters in my timeline, at least 2025. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
If you haven't picked a resolution yet, I suggest maybe not being mouthing off your crappy takes on the internet. It's I hate that the worst is coming out right here on the heels of the playoffs. Just no Steeler Nation has no concept of history, or maybe they're just too young. Maybe we're so old now that we just can't relate to this young generation of hater Yinzer. In the last 10 years, which I keep being told is the Steelers' dark age, Pittsburgh has 101 regular season wins. Only the Chiefs have more. Actually, I think the Bills just cracked 102 this past weekend. So, in the last 10 years, 30 teams have less wins than the same old Steelers. The Broncos haven't made the playoffs since 2015, almost 10 years. The Chargers have made the playoffs 3 times since 2009, the last 15 years. Jags have made the playoffs twice since 2007. Raiders made the playoffs twice since 2002. That's 20 plus years. Miami is 0-5 in the playoffs since 2001. And the Jets haven't been to the playoffs at all in since 2010. So
Right.
Cry me a river, Steelers Nation. No one is aware of how the other half lives. Maybe that's all. Maybe just Steeler Nation sits in their pierogi towers. No appreciation or empathy for what the rest of the league is up to. But if we don't win, we should have 10 Super Bowls, or this team sucks.
I do think it's the Steelers might be the first fan base to have seen their team lose by more than 2 touchdowns or more in 3 times in 10 days. I mean, in the spirit of trying to be charitable to my fellow Yinzer, that's the best I can hope for in this new year.
Yeah, maybe. That sounds like some kind of stat. That's a loser stat, if you ask me.
Certainly. Oh,
Stats
absolutely.
are
it
often
is.
for losers.
Right.
I don't, tell me about it. Whatever. It's what Jin's talking about. The conversation about the Steelers, social media conversation, exposing all your hot and toxic takes. And there's just so many. I can't even, I'm not blocking people. I'm not muting people.
Okay.
But I'm basically am. I just can't deal with these so-called fans.
That's a good thing that you don't always expose yourself to this, 24/7, 365.
Yeah, I guess. I just want to, I want to be able to talk Steelers somewhere, but certainly not on the internet. Let's get to some of these takes. There's actually, there's a couple here that I guess embody my point of view. that's the thing. It's like, oh, but these are just my opinions. No, I'll say it again. Opinions are, Troy Polamalu is my favorite Steeler. Okay, that's an opinion. But these like fire Terrell Austin, fire Tomlin, mediocre Steelers, those aren't opinions. Those are toxic agendas or something. They're not. What you think is an opinion is so uninformed that you don't get on the opinion spectrum with some of these takes.
Well, there's some opinions are much better than others. I mean, they're more backed by facts, they're more backed by logic and reason than a lot of just angry emotion.
There needs to be a different category. They're not opinions. They're less than opinions. What's less than an opinion?
Lashing out.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is a lash out, and lash outs don't elevate to the level of opinions. But if anything, these are some opinions that I agree with. Let's get to some of these takes. We'll start with at Ken Sterner. Ken Sterner. I've been a Steelers fan for 50 years. They've won 6 Super Bowls in that time. That's 12%. Guess what? That's the best percentage in those 50 years. A good friend of mine has been a Bills fan for close to 50 years. He's never seen a championship. Let that sink in. Yeah, even the mighty Bills, who are apparently one of the elite teams. Well, yep, they haven't won a ring in 50 years. We've seen 6 of them in that time. Even if you haven't been around, even if you've only been around for 20 years and you've seen one Super Bowl win and another Super Bowl appearance, that is so much more than the majority of the NFL fan base.
Absolutely.
More takes from
Okay.
at Lord D Noble 712. Lord D Noble. For Steeler fans, the worst timeline is 10-6 and a guaranteed trip to the playoffs. Meanwhile, other fan bases, and then we've got some screenshots from angry TikToks from Browns fans and Cowboys, Bears, Colts fans. Once again, more, if you're not a Steelers fan, man, you've never seen this kind of miserableness. I don't know.
Yeah, miserableness is a word, and it's been what, more than 20 years now since they had a losing season. I'm so grateful we do this podcast not right after the game, because I was feeling fairly negative on Christmas, but it's a lot easier to hear these things and to understand them and internalize them a week later. But this is also why you shouldn't fire off toxic takes in the wake of a game.
10-6, and we're acting like it's mediocre. 9-8 is mediocre. 10-6 is mediocre. 10-7. No, that is the play. If you're playoff caliber, you're in the best half of the league. You're in the best 45% of the league. We're just so fat and sassy and spoiled that we've never seen worse than 500 in a generation. So we've mistaken mediocre for greatness. We expect greatness every year, and that's just we should be so fortunate that, because there's 30 teams, so we should be
32.
32. So
Even more.
Once every 16 years, if you're flirting with a Super Bowl appearance, that's kind of the odds, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. It's but I mean, you have to put yourself in a position to be able to make it, to do those once every 16 years, and the team does enough to be in that position once every 16 years. I mean, I was thinking about everything you said, just having that stupid Monday night game on between the Niners and the Lions. We heard how the Niners had the league's best roster, and then 2 guys got hurt for a period of time, and bam, losing season.
Yeah, boom. Exactly. Would you rather be a Niners fan right now? Give me a break. Give me a break. Playoff contender every year, and even when we haven't been recently, we've been, waiting there on week 17 or week 18 to get in or not get in. The last 3 times we haven't been in, we were the 7 seed. We would have been in now under today's rules.
Right.
So, and then who knows what happens in the playoffs? Everyone thinks, oh, you're not a contender. Well, when you're in the playoffs, then the contention begins. I'd rather be flirting, even if it's a 6 or 7 seed every year, at least you're in the dance. Like you said, Niners. Oh yeah, well, I would be miserable as a Niners fan this season. So
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's with the high expectations they came in with to see those all crash and crash so early. Oh my word. And it's not like they play in the greatest division of all time either, record-wise.
no, although it's been pretty competitive this
Yeah,
season,
it's
I
been
think.
competitive, but there's no like I mean, not this is not what are you mining about, but
Yeah.
there's no 13 or 14 win team in that division.
There is not. How about this? At Joe Frick. Y'all are so spoiled, man. Every week of football has been meaningful since Seven retired. Teams like New England and New Orleans have been ass since their QB left. Teams like Chargers, Bengals, Buffalo, Baltimore have done jack with their elite quarterbacks. We've been competitive in a rebuild for crying out loud. LOL.
Hmm.
So that's just more of what we've been saying.
Absolutely.
Is this the rebuild? I don't know. I can't tell what the rebuild era was. I guess it was Ben's. Was it Ben's last year up until? I mean, are we still in the rebuild? I don't know.
I don't think you necessarily know the rebuild's over. You don't know when you're in the rebuild until it's over. I think is kind of how it works. Since you could argue the Pirates have been in a rebuild now for over 30 years. I think the rebuild ends when you're a contender. But I mean, I don't know if that ends when, and again, then you start getting into when is a team a contender, a team that can win everything, or a team that's favored to win everything. So I think it's the rebuild is maybe a lot like they used to talk about obscenity. I mean, you know it when you see it, when it's over. You can define it at that point. But so I mean, I would say the rebuild is continuing, but I think that's part of why people's emotions are so thrown off. Is that some of them, get trying to be charitable to people, which is not always my greatest gift. Is that maybe some of them thought they were further along in the rebuild, or that the rebuild was over than maybe they were, or maybe they had higher expectations for them being at this point than perhaps they've been able to meet. And but I don't think the rebuild is 100% over just yet.
I would think at least this season. I think on defense. Uh, well, it's like next year we're going to need to restock on the D line. At this moment, I
Yeah.
think on defense, it's not like the years past when we had no idea what was going on at inside
Hmm.
linebacker or a
Right.
secondary, which at least, for the moment, we seem to have solid starters there. On
You can name most of
offense,
the guys on the secondary. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, can you
Mhm.
say the offensive line rebuild is over? I think those pieces are pretty much in place now, maybe.
They are. I think a lot of the pieces are hurt, but
Yeah.
yes, I think the blueprint for what the rebuild for the groundwork has been laid, for lack of an even worse analogy, on the offensive line. So I think a lot of that's there. I just wonder how much people hear the word rebuild in football and just naturally assume it's synonymous with quarterback.
Yeah, well, in that case, I mean, I don't know. I think the rebuild's done. Who knows? How
Right. I
about
think, yeah, we don't know.
yeah,
Mhm.
at the 412 kid, Bryce. You know who else has 3 playoff wins since 2014? John Harbaugh. Yeah, I don't I we'll talk Tomlin, I'm sure throughout the show, but I'm sick of the no playoff wins in 7 games. Yeah, it's I would, I'm not proud. I'm not hanging my terrible towel on that hook, but in all those situations, it can't be. That's not a Tomlin. I don't think that's a Tomlin stat. No playoff wins in the last 7 years. I look at 2020, which was a turnover game.
Mhm.
2018 in the playoffs against the Jags was execution, not necessarily coaching. I mean, the 7 seeds losses against what the Chiefs and the Bills.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that the playoff stat is a Tomlin stat at this point. I think it's individual seasons with execution issues and uh just like any given Sunday, any given game, any team can win. And we've thrown the dice 7 times and we've come up snake eyes 7 times.
Yeah,
So
non-competitive, blown out snake eyes for the most part. And even this last Bills game was the closest of any of them. Yeah, on a long enough timeline, that does, if you were betting it, eventually you would have to bet on that trend going the other way. But that there's ever a team that's been due for the playoffs after 7, just turnover filled defensive breakdown games. If nothing else, we know that if there's one thing we've learned from Hard Knocks, it's just if you didn't know it before, just how serious Tomlin takes the idea of being safe with the ball and not turning it over. So even just throwing up to the Chiefs, where they did turn the ball over a few times, we saw how much that they were preaching ball security, and I'm sure the same was said before each of those playoff losses as well.
yeah, if Russ throws a pick six in the playoffs this year, or a red zone pick like Mason did last year, are we going to be like, oh, Tomlin didn't have this team ready because they're throwing turnovers? I can't see that. Um, how about we're already trying to quantify what the season is. How about this tweet from at Steelers_DB Derek? If the Steelers beat the Bengals in Week 18, beat the Texans in the wild card, but lose in the divisional round, would you consider this a successful season? 68.2% yes, 31.8% no.
One, bless you, and two, I find that stunningly level-headed. I would not have anticipated people being quite this reasonable. I would absolutely consider that a successful season because, as I said, when the season started, what do I want to see? I want to see progress, and that's real progress. They got to the divisional round, and they beat a good team, a team on the rise. I know the people are down on the Texans right now, but they won their division going away. They absolutely deserve to be in the playoffs.
I'd like to recommend you a game.
A lot of people thought they would be a real contender coming into this season, so they certainly could turn it on. So that would absolutely be a win. And I mean, I'd like to amend that to, I'd like to not lose by 14 or more in that divisional round game as well. But yes, I would absolutely consider that to be a successful season.
Well, you might not be on the same page with at Mike Goaded 7. Mike, by the way, if the Steelers play the Texans in the playoffs and win, but then lose to Kansas City or Buffalo the next week, that isn't a successful season. The Texans aren't a very good football team. Well, who are the very good football teams? It's Kansas City, Buffalo, and Ravens. I
And
mean,
the Eagles and the Lions, and I'm sure that would be the only teams that Mike would see as teams that are good teams, the Super Bowl favorites, which is what those 5 or 6 or however many teams I named are.
and the
And
Chiefs haven't scored 30 points in a game, I mean, the Ravens have lost to teams like the Browns and the Steelers. So
Oh yeah, no. I mean, the Chiefs with that defense. I was at that game on Christmas. They didn't have to score 30 points. That defense is as good as it gets. But yeah, no, those are each the teams that are Super Bowl favorites. And again, so we're back to it's not a successful season unless you're a Super Bowl favorite. And if you are a Super Bowl favorite, I can't imagine this person would say it's a successful season if you just win in the divisional round.
um one more from this type of tweet. No, not going to give me it. Thank you. At Tim Benz, PGH, Tim Benz. At this point, what's the minimum for a successful season in your opinion? 51.4% says just win a playoff game. 29.5% say beat Cincy and win a playoff game. 15.4% say win 2 playoff games. And then 3.7% say beat the Ravens in the playoffs. What is your level? I think I don't
That's a
know.
confusing poll.
Do you need to beat? Can you lose to Cincy this weekend but still win a playoff game and consider that to be successful?
Oh, 1,000%. That would be an even more successful season because that would mean that you beat the Ravens in the playoffs in Baltimore. That would be fantastic. That's not. I would not assume that to happen, nor would I expect that to happen should the Steelers lose on Saturday night to Cincinnati. But yes, that would also be the mark of a successful season. I mean, I mean, I don't know if I made it. I guess I didn't make it clear in the last section, but yeah, if win a playoff game to me is real progress for this team, whether or not they win against Cincinnati on Saturday night. I have no idea. I have a better feel for them going in the playoff game than I do for whatever's going to happen in this Saturday night Cincinnati game. The Steelers could win, they could lose. I have no idea what's going to happen there. That one is confusing to me, especially since the Ravens games before it, which seems odd.
Yeah, I mean, what if it's another shootout but this time they squeak out the win? I'm not
Right.
gonna. I don't know. There's so much the Bengals are playing on for their lives,
Yes.
where Steelers, even Tomlin was like, yeah, maybe later in the week I will consider not playing some guys if the Ravens win the division. I don't know how honest that is, but
Yeah, I kind of thought that might be a bit of a lie too. But I will say, I mean, fan bases are fan bases. I made the mistake of after Cincinnati's big win against Denver, clicking on some big Bengals fan analyst Twitter feed, reading the comments, and every single person, Bengals fan to a person, said, "Oh, well, the Steelers are going to rest their starters, right? Well, the Steelers are surely going to rest their starters." I'm like, okay, no one knows anything anywhere, is what I'm getting out of this. And,
yeah, I was hoping that the Bengals would be out of it by now and they would rest their
Right,
starters.
exactly. Yes, there was a lot of, yeah. Everyone was rooting for rest come the weekend after Christmas.
I'm rooting for rest right now. I think am I depressed or am I just overslept?
Mhm.
How about then there's just the straight up dumb tweets
Yes. Hmm.
at Heisenberg. Anyone else secretly hoping the Steelers lose the next two so actual changes are made? Uh, yeah, let's just dump out of this season so we can work ahead on next season to get those changes. What changes, even if they do lose to Cincy, lose in the playoffs,
Hmm.
people are acting like, I mean, the changes that are going to come are probably going to be uh I don't know, personnel. I don't think that
Yeah.
that's going to, we're not going to see changes in the coaching staff. I don't think everyone keeps saying Terrell Austin is on the hot seat. I don't think so. I don't,
Yeah, I don't think so either.
no one was saying they weren't saying in the locker room, um, we've got 11 players or we got 10 players on the same page. One person isn't, and that's Coach Terrell Austin. No one was throwing the coaching under the bus in this losing streak.
Hmm.
I don't think they
Yeah.
have.
No, 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 no. And I mean, it's there's a way to interpret it that, well, the coach should have them communicating or this they're making the same mistakes across the three games. But yeah, but they made the same mistakes across 3 days, and what a weird schedule that was. No, they're not getting rid of Austin. I mean, it's he's still under contract. They're not going to be the defense hasn't maybe been the greatest unit in the league, but they certainly haven't been bad. No, I mean it's they will make the only change I could see if they lose out that would be surprising at this moment is I think the Russ negotiation becomes much more of a negotiation. Like then they have a real conversation. Because remember, if whatever changes would happen for them losing out, which hopefully does not happen, I think it would have a lot to do with how exactly they lose out. I think that whatever personnel changes come off of that has a lot to do with how that occurs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the story's been turnovers. I mean,
Hmm.
according to Tomlin, at least, the story these last 3 weeks are turnovers and not taking advantage of turnovers. So,
Oh yeah, I mean it's how many fumbles has the other team had in a row that the Steelers didn't get between the Ravens game and the Chiefs game. That was a lot. I counted three in the Chiefs game off the top of my head that the Chiefs fumbled, then the Chiefs got back, and the Steelers got one of Russ's fumbles back too. But there were I want to say at least two or three in the Ravens game as well, and that's as if there's one thing we're learning here in the last few days, it's that streaks don't last forever.
I've trained myself to hate it.
yeah, I'm hating it. Where were we? Oh, how about a little well, this is kind of somewhat from the before stuff, but let's go to at
Hmm.
Steeler Nation. Steeler Nation. What would be the best case scenario in your mind? Um, 55% say being the 5 seed going to Houston. 41.4% say being the 3 seed at home versus the Chargers. and only 3.6% say being the sixth seed at the Ravens. Would you rather be on the road in Houston, or would you be rather be at home against the Chargers?
Oh, I'd rather be at home against the Chargers. You'd be divisional champions. Sure, Herbert would be playing in this game, but it's not like, Herbert was beating them up in the game that Justin played earlier in the season. I'd like to think that both teams have learned a lot over the course of the season. What a good measuring stick that would be for the Steelers. But that would also mean they're divisional champions, which means that somehow the Browns overcame being 19-point dogs to beat the Ravens somehow, and the Steelers beat the Bengals. So yes, I would absolutely take that. At Houston, I mean, everyone seems to think they've been terrible. Again, they're still a division champion that won their division. That's very hard for me to envision as being so bad, but that certainly seems like the second place. I'd be, home to Chargers, at the Texans, in Baltimore. Like, to me, there's a precipitous fall to that particular scenario.
Yeah, plus you could have a shot at another home game. You never know
Right.
if the Bills or Chiefs go down, then there's a second home game in Heinz Field. I don't know.
Hmm.
All right, let's just do one Tomlin hater because at Jay Bailey NFL, Jared Bailey, reigning hater of the year. The Steelers have a Mike Tomlin problem. That doesn't mean they should fire him, but it does mean he needs to evolve so they can get back into having deep playoff runs rather than getting constantly beat up by the actual great teams. Well, how does he define evolve? He doesn't really, but he cites the collapses from 2019 to 2023, which for like, this is the kind of um disingenuine critique, calling the 2019 run a collapse. Yes, Duck could have beat the Jets and gotten us into the playoffs, but we're talking about an undrafted rookie quarterback. If anything, Tomlin gets credit for keeping that team as competitive as it was.
Hmm.
20 last year wasn't a collapse. Mason Rudolph came in for 3 games and took us to the playoffs again. Um, I mean, what you can blame? Oh, Tomlin didn't get Mason in early enough in the season. The same Mason who, tied the 0-8 Lions a season before. I'm not, those weren't collapses. If anything, Tomlin held those teams together. The lack of coaching tree comes up again. Why doesn't Tomlin have a coaching tree? Well, where are these other coaching trees? A lot of these Belichick guys are out of the league. Or what about the lack of coaching tree? These guys, a lot of Tomlin's guys were older guys.
Yeah. Hmm. You beat me to
They
that.
weren't
Yeah.
they weren't looking for those head coaching jobs.
And Tomlin never gets credit as coaching tree for having Arians, although that would count if you were if you were going to be
Yes,
real about coaching.
yeah, he went on to win a Super Bowl. Coaching tree, the how many of his players have become coaches? If anything, that should be somewhat of a coaching tree. I don't know. Just because, Randy Fichtner didn't get hired as the next, Lions coach or something. At the
Hmm.
same in the same article that it compliments Dan Campbell's, like, well, if Dan Campbell loses a coordinator to another team, he can bring up someone like Randall L or something. And it's like, isn't that what Tomlin does? He hires from within, and that's seen as a
Hmm.
negative. But Dan Campbell, he has the strength of staff that he can hire from within. I just hate the coaching tree argument. The last point that Tomlin needs to evolve on is he needs to stop focusing on defense. He's stuck in the past because he focuses on defense compared to spending 50 million on a quarterback. What do you want? Do you want Aaron Rodgers? Look how that turned out. Do you want Derek Carr? Look how that turned out. Where Joe Flacco? I would have taken. Actually, I would have taken Flacco. I guess I don't know.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I mean, but we're also biased because we saw Flacco and it was easily his best game of the season. Like, we didn't see him
Yeah.
again when he got benched. So I agree with you. I also said the same about Flacco. The coaching tree argument is always disingenuous, simply put, because if the Tomlin had an excellent coaching tree, these same people would be complaining. No one has ever kept a job because they had a great coaching tree. If anything, these complaints would morph into why did we let that guy go and not have him replace Tomlin? So that's how disingenuous that is. I mean, the collapses. I mean, it's what 7 years now that they've had a 3-game losing streak in the after Thanksgiving or in the second half of the season or something like that. But that gets back. I mean, while that's not good, that does get back to what you talked about, how Tomlin managed to always bring those teams back together on some level. So that's that the locker room was never lost or whatever that goofiness is. I mean, while that those 3-game losing streaks aren't optimal at I don't know how they could have been avoided this particular season or in, like you said, the duck season and stuff like that. So but yeah, so I think you did a fairly decent job of picking that apart.
When are we going to stop doing this to Mike Tomlin?
When? Because when he's gone, we're going to be we're not going to realize what we had until he's gone. Or if these takes continue into the future, if we're doing, Tomlin won with Cowers players in 2050, then I can't. I'm gonna have to give up on I'm gonna have to be the Steelers hermit living in some cave just watching the. What about? Well, we got to talk Russ, I think.
It's my quarterback.
We'll just do one thing. At Stats Guy Daniel Valente. Russell Wilson ranks 32 out of 34 QBs in EPA per drop since week 14. Only quarterbacks who are worse are Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Jameis Winston. I forget what EPA is again, but if you take the turnovers, I feel like Russ is statistically doing fine. It's just, but you can't take away the turnovers. That's obviously a component.
Oh yeah, and I mean, again, I'm not qualified to speak on it, but I've certainly heard many people talk about, not seeing open receivers, that kind of thing. Certainly the interception against the Chiefs, that was the killer. I mean, that game was over in the first quarter, in large part. They were already down 13, but that interception absolutely killed it. I mean, I can't help but separate the turnovers from how much the offensive line has been dominated in these last 3 games. That they've run okay, but my God, Russ has had to run for his life, and he's far too old to run for his life at this point.
Yeah, let's give him a little time and see what he can do. And yeah, the one thing that got me was when I guess it was it was the Hard Knocks, but I guess it was the Ravens defensive coordinator when he was like, Russ
Yeah.
has the home run or the check down. That's it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if whether or not that's true or not, that kind of feels true when he is able to throw something in between there. Those seem to be the drives that are like, yeah, we're moving the ball down the field. I don't know. Do you feel there's truth to he's either home run or bunt?
Oh yeah, I mean, and also that Ravens defensive analyst of their like entire team of defensive analysts, or all the workers, all the elves in the mines there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That also, if nothing else, that's certainly how the Ravens played him and played him more or less successfully. I mean, it helps that the defense was, of course, completely dominated in that game by the Ravens offense too. So that gave I think that helped the Ravens defense a lot in terms of how they could play Russ. But yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
So is that just is that just a feature of keeping Russ, or can he evolve further past that
Yeah, I
at
think he
this
can evolve
age?
further past that with a better offensive line and more
Yeah.
than a receiver and a half. I think with those two things, then yes, he can definitely do. And because who's he going to throw to intermediate? I mean, Skoranek wasn't even there for much of the Ravens game. I mean, Calvin Austin is not going over the middle. Although that might be one of the guys over the middle that Russ could conceivably see, since I mean we've heard for forever that Russ has trouble seeing into the middle of the field since he's so much shorter than the average star quarterback. And yeah, I think Russ seems to be. I think part of the reason they may end up keeping Russ, and I'm glad you pressed me on this because I just kind of put this together, is that he's the first quarterback they've had post Ben that really could take advantage of having a better cast around him. I'm not sure the other guys necessarily could do that. Not that Kenny couldn't win, not that even Mason couldn't win. It's that if you put enough of the guys around Russ, there's still probably enough of Russ in there to be able to elevate these guys to somewhere else. So I think that's what, even if this slide does continue, I could see that being why they bring Russ back, is that, hey, if we put a little bit more around him, this is our best chance right now to do some more with this thing.
Batted balls have kind of not been, I don't know if that's been a highly spoken thing, but that's been an issue too, talking about the shortness.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Ben's last contract was like 29 million for 2 years, and that was what in 2019. So now that we're
Mhm.
in 2025, could you give Russ, you'd have to give Russ 2 years. I mean, what, 35? You'd have to be more
Whatever they
than.
gave Baker. I mean, everyone looks at the Baker contract as a good analogy, and I imagine that makes sense. And Baker has, an actual Hall of Fame wide receiver. I mean, one on the downside of his career, but some genuinely great offensive linemen. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to the rest of the Buccaneers beyond that, but I know those two are there. So yeah, I imagine you could look at the Baker contract and it'll look a lot like the Baker contract. But that's presuming that one of these two games turns around here. I mean, it's if that doesn't, then I think you're in a whole different conversation of, are they really bringing Russ back? I think they would anyway. But then that becomes a different conversation.
Let's talk more offense. At Blitzberg, Mike Florio theorizes that George Pickens wants to leave Steelers after the Chiefs loss. So I don't know if you were at the game, so you probably didn't see it, but when
I tried to avoid it afterwards because that video made me very angry. Yes,
oh,
I
you
did everything
saw
I
it?
could
How
not.
so
I
they
saw bits and pieces of it. I mean, as soon as I see a member of the other team wearing a Santa outfit at the game I was at, I turn it off because that personally makes me very upset.
Yeah, so they were I guess it was NFL
Oh, I
Network,
know what the
the
video
post
is.
game.
George comes over and says, "Come get me." Yeah, I know
Does he
what the
say come
video
get
meant.
me? Does he say
I
that?
mean, I don't know. I've only read that. I don't know if he actually says it.
I
Mhm.
think he just said good game and he shook their hands, but Florio
Sure.
is theorizing that that's what the symbolism of that post-game handshake. I don't know.
I don't either. I know George is a very, very emotional person who's genuinely weird. Like if you've ever seen any of those like Steelers sideline clips, they like him, but he's someone that's like not always in on the joke. So I can see George being like overcome in the moment and definitely going over there and shaking those guys' hands. Sure. I don't know if that means get rid of him. I mean, I don't know if that means he wants out. I sure George would be perfectly content to play in many, many other cities. I don't think he's so tied to Pittsburgh. But I wouldn't take that. I just take that as a guy who has a lot of emotions and maybe isn't always great at managing them or in managing them in ways we can necessarily easily interpret, doing something very emotional.
I think it's a stretch. I don't think that's a
Mm-hmm.
come get me. That's
I can agree with you. Yeah.
I don't know. Although it is weird to go like while they're sitting in front of the cameras to go over there. I don't think I've ever seen that where
I don't think I have
the
either.
opposing player comes and says, they do that in the middle of the field. Where was he? Who was he talking to in that moment? Why didn't he go over then?
Right.
I don't know.
I mean, but it could even be as simple as that. Like, hey, I got to talk to all these other guys, or maybe this conversation with this guy I know ran long. This is the one chance I'm going to get to see those guys. Hey, good game.
At Scarpizio Scarps, I think they should consider trading Pickens this offseason. Consider it, entertain it. Not saying they should, but if the price is right, you can avoid all the upcoming headaches. He's never going to see the bigger picture. If you trade Pickens, then you've got to be in the market for, I don't know, is T. Higgins the top free agent? But you're either going to pay 30 million to T. Higgins or you're going to extend Pickens for probably at least 20, who maybe
Yes,
closer to 30. I don't know.
I agree. No, I mean it's you know I see the rationale behind this, and I don't think it's crazy, even just to talk to somebody and see what the market would be. But unless someone gives you some just absurd, Ricky Williams like number of draft picks or whatever, you can't do it because immediately then you have to a sign Higgins or someone equivalent to that, and B you also have to get a first round draft pick receiver in addition to whatever else you were doing in the first round. So you have to get multiple guys if George is gone. So I mean, I can see the point. because the negotiations with George for his contract are going to be very weird, most likely. Hopefully they're not. I hate to live in my fears, but boy, oh boy, just imagine, a couple of people smarter than me have brought it up. Imagine the Brendan Ayuk thing all over again, just this time that's you're the 49ers and you're listening to having to deal with every day him not showing up at minicamp, him showing up and wearing a shirt on the side. George smiled with his wide receivers coach. What does it mean? Like, so that it could be an entire summer of that. So I see the rationale behind this, even though I don't think they're going to do it.
That's just dirty rumors.
Yeah, we can't speculate and regulate yet. Yet, can we? Not yet.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Not
No.
yet.
It's January. It's January. That is very much a May problem, or an April one, I guess.
Yeah, it'd have to be before the draft. It'd have to be a March problem, right, for free agency.
Most
Don't-
likely, yeah.
At Stats Guy Daniel Valente, no offensive lineman has allowed more sacks than Dan Moore Jr. since week 10. 8 sacks allowed. A bad time for the Steelers left tackle to revert back to his prior form. All right, so we don't have to worry about giving him an extension. So then you've got Fautanu at right tackle. Broderick Jones moves to left tackle, maybe. Now,
Most likely.
Are we drafting a tackle? Or I think it'd be more logical to sign a veteran instead of trying to have 3 tackles with 2 or less years experience.
I think that's an idea. I think that's a solid idea right now. You go shopping at the bargain bin of tackles, which is still going to be more expensive than people would like, but it's not going to be the amount of money that even Dan Moore is going to get. I mean, the guy you're going to sign to back up Broderick Jones is actually probably going to be not as good as Dan Moore. That's the irony of all of this. But he's also going to have a manageable cap number. The only other idea is, and I like yours better because then you have somebody that, is over at the age of 24, but you would then at some point basically draft the next Dan Moore, some guy in the 4th or 5th round, and hope he grows into that sizable backup. But man, no. I mean, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the idea is whatever money you save from letting James Daniel go, is that can be put into finding this new backup tackle.
How about the Jim Wexell idea? He wants to convert Washington into a tackle.
I mean, maybe it's the only. I mean, my only knock against that is that the biggest reason Washington isn't a better receiver is that from what I've read, and it makes sense, is that the worries about his injury history aren't far off. I mean, that his knee is not great. So I mean, I assume that knee could hold up better as a tackle than a third string tight end. But man, I don't know. That's something I'm sure they've discussed. But I'm not ready to do that just yet. I'd rather see who's out there for hey, could you be a bargain tackle to back up these guys?
It's good to see the big boy.
Yeah, okay. How about in times of trouble, there's always revisionist history. At Panther 4954710 Panther Pride Mike. Imagine being the Steelers brass and drafting Terrell Edmonds in the 1st round with Lamar Jackson, the Heisman winner, still on the board. Ben was at the end of his career. Jackson could have sat a year and then took over. I mean, I don't know. We could probably every year, every round, pick who the guy that we could have had now. Looking back at what year was that? 2018? Ben was saying he was going to stick around. Ben wasn't saying he was ready to tie it up. He was mad that they drafted Mason Rudolph,
Yes, and that whatever the draft strategy at the time, and I think they were more clear about this as time went on, was that, it is one last ride with Ben or bust. and all of the draft credit, and it's not like they went bust in that the team bottomed out, but they did go bust in that that strategy did not lead to a championship. So that's why they didn't draft Lamar. They didn't draft Hurts, who has told everyone and never moved off his story that he was convinced the Steelers were going to draft him. He said that multiple times in different venues. So I think, they also saw how Ben reacted to the drafting of Mason, which was not well. And they thought, okay, we can put a team around him to win this one more time. And it didn't work. And so many of what we now see as drafting problems were really just a theory of the team that did not end up bearing fruit.
How about this? You mentioned Hertz. We'll skip over that.
Mm-hmm.
This might be more accurate as far as revisionist history. At Happiest Porch, Dave and Carrie Basili. If Shazier and AB don't get hurt in back-to-back years, or Marquise Pouncey doesn't snap the ball over Ben's head to start the playoff game, we might be discussing a totally different narrative right now. I'd certainly say the Shazier injury seemed to
That's the
derail
only
the.
one. That's the
Yeah.
only one I agree with here. That maybe that's a different world if Shazier isn't hurt. That's the other two. I'm sorry. That's that 2020 team. But that was a team that you can say actually collapsed. But again, no matter how good a coach Tomlin is, he couldn't make Ben any younger. And that offensive line was fading out then, and Tomlin couldn't make them any younger either. The AB thing, I think it's easy to, if we're doing revisionist history, it's easy to say now AB was eventually going to lose his mind. So on a long enough timeline, that was always going to happen. We saw it. That's why he ran out of Pittsburgh, because again, he didn't show up for a game. I mean, that's the worst betrayal of your team you can. Maybe it could have been AB storming through an end zone, taking off his Steelers jersey. Maybe that would have been how it ended. But the Shazier thing, yeah, I mean, if he doesn't get hurt, maybe that is something different. I don't know. There were enough other flaws with that team that maybe we weren't aware of at the time, but that's one where, okay, maybe that does make a difference. I mean, that's a lightning strike that two roads in the wood there. But yeah, that's the only one of these revisionist histories I'd be willing to entertain that perhaps there might have been a different outcome.
Say they give AB that because I think they were talking contract extension. So they give AB
Probably.
a contract, and then Ben goes down. How's AB going to handle the duck season? Or,
Right.
I don't think that would have ended bad
There's no way
one
that
way or
there's
another.
yeah, it's even Doctor Strange couldn't find a way that was going to work out. There was no good future there.
All right. Well, I think that the band is on the field. They still play. They still played Renegade on Christmas, didn't they? I
We
was
were we
surprised.
were we were in the part we were on our way out at since we'd thought about sticking for Renegade, but at 19 points, well, we were discussing, after they were down 13, when are we going to leave this game? And but when they were down 19, and I explained to her, no, they had to get the ball back, and then the Chiefs would have to get the ball back again. There were multiple possessions, so we were not there for the them playing, and then the fans rightfully booing Renegade. But
Oh, they
yes, we were
booed
not there for that.
Renegade?
I heard some people did. I wasn't there. I heard some did. I don't know. I certainly understand that if you're sitting there and they're trying to fire up a defense, which at that point is down 19. But yes, I heard some people did. I can't speak to that. I wasn't there.
Or you went to this game on Christmas and then you didn't get to hear Renegade. That would have been a
Right.
big piece of coal in the stocking.
Absolutely. Yes. Since the game was long decided by the time it would have been played.
One last thing. At Jerry Dulac. Hines Ward has more catches than Torrey Holt and more touchdowns than all three of the other receiver finalists. So neither Hines Ward nor James Harrison advanced to the Hall of Fame finalists. I think this is, I don't want to say stick a fork in it, but I think that this is going to be it. Maybe for both. If Ward can't get in, and I thought, is Harrison going to get in? I know it's only his first time, right? So
It's close to his first time. I mean, it's the senior committee could help here on a long enough timeline, and Ward honestly seems like the kind of guy the senior committee would eventually help, in that he seems like he's really getting into coaching, like he's serious about this. I mean, areas you're coaching wide receivers at Arizona State, you're not just doing this for something to do. So that seems like the kind of guy that could help. You know, it's weird. I keep hearing all these stats about how Ward did better than all these other receivers, but I remember thinking when Ward retired, there's no way he's getting into the Hall of Fame. So I think the propaganda is working on me, or now I'm starting to believe maybe Ward should get into the Hall of Fame, even though at the time I thought, hey, Ward was great, but I can't see him getting in. But now I guess it's starting to wear me down too.
I just think there's with so many Steelers already in, is it almost just like, we're sick of another Steeler.
And there are more to come. I mean, Ben's going to get in on the first ballot. I mean, someday TJ is. I mean, it's, so yeah.
Pouncey, I imagine.
Cam's going to get in. Cam is going to get in. This year solidified that. I don't care if they never wins a playoff game. He's getting in. So I mean, there's Steelers on the horizon too. So.
Maybe if Ben gets inducted and then he says, hey, we got to get Hines in, I could see something like that, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a good point, Kyle. I hadn't thought of that. That's a real good point.
All right. Well, that's what we've been talking about.
That's what we've been talking about.
It's it all comes down to this, and then next week too, and then who knows after.
It comes down more to next week than it comes down to this. Yes.
Yeah, that's true. As much as this is not a must win, as much as it'd be a nice win, it's not a must win. So
exactly.
All right. Next week we'll be back together again. And
yes, we will.
The Zoom era will be over. We'll be back together for the playoffs.
I see snow outside the window. I can't wait to be back at your place, Kyle.
Or maybe we need to find a place. I don't know. I feel like we need to figure out. I don't know. We need to get ready to take it to another level. I think I say that every other month or somehow. But
when you're not saying about how it's time to quit, then it's time to take it to another level. Believe me, I understand the feeling.
Maybe we'll get some songs back for the playoffs. Maybe I don't know. I got to figure out some things. I don't know. I think it's been much like the losing streak. It's been kind of unexciting. But we'll keep the conversation going on social media. I'm on TikTok and all the rest. I'm at Kyle Kreis. Greg, how about yourself?
Unfortunately, you can find me on Instagram at Greg Benevent, B as in boy, E-N-E, V as in Victor, E-N-T.
Get hyped for, I guess it's not, is it technically hell raising season? I guess hell raising season is technically over, but we still, there's, playoff season is even more urgent than hell raising season. So
yeah, it's the next level up or down from hell raising season, depending on how you define
another level of hell. It's the Dante, is that Dante's Inferno? I don't know.
I think it's from the 10th circle to the 11th. Yes.
All right, until next week when playoff season starts in seriousness, keep listening to your coach.
Be their best selves. That's going to be required.
Stay in school.